Okay, so welcome to our webinar on natural and safe respiratory support. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm an Army wife. I've been a registered nurse for 8 years, and I love pulmonary medicine, so the lungs are one of my faves. I do have a master's degree in nursing education. I'm a certified holistic health coach, a natural health educator, wellness advocate, essential oils guru, and a certified network marketing coach. So our intentions for this webinar is to learn a little bit about the structure and function of the respiratory system, as well as different respiratory conditions and how they affect your respiratory system. And the reason for that little anatomy lesson is understanding what's going on is how you can kind of decide which oils to use. So we'll look at kind of what's going on in our lungs during those different conditions, and then based on properties of essential oils, you can decide what to use. So then, of course, we'll talk about how to support those things with essential oils. So these statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. None of these products are intended to prevent, treat, or cure disease. Remember that your lifestyle choices help prevent disease. Your doctor treats symptoms and fixes broken parts, and your body cures disease. So really quick, what is an essential oil? Essential oils are natural aromatic compounds found in plants. They're steam distilled or cold pressed, and we pull them out of the plants to use them for our health benefits. They're powerful and safe without side effects, and as we'll see in a minute, also without building up any kind of resistance. They're 50 to 70 times more powerful than the herb itself. We like to talk about it takes 28 cups of peppermint tea to match 1 drop of peppermint oil in terms of the health benefits. And because they're natural, oils actually have the ability to get into a cell and not only protect it from other threats that are within the cell, but also to affect the function of the cell. So a little bit about the respiratory system. As you can see down at the bottom, we actually have an upper respiratory system and a lower respiratory system. It starts at our nose and our mouth, goes down through our pharynx, which is the back of our throat, into our larynx, which is where your voice box and your vocal cords are, down through the trachea, splits into the bronchi, and the bronchioles are the small airways, and then you have the actual lung tissue itself. And you'll notice that we are protected by a rib cage that all is lined with muscles, and then you have the diaphragm up underneath the lungs that is one big muscle as well. So in terms of functions of the respiratory system, we're going to take in air from the atmosphere, we're going to filter any kind of bacteria and toxins out of the air, we will do an exchange of oxygen for carbon dioxide, which we'll look closer at in just a second, and we're going to expel that carbon dioxide as a waste. And so carbon dioxide is something that our body makes through normal everyday metabolic function, but we need a way to get it out, and breathing out is one of those ways. So looking a little bit closer at the anatomy of the respiratory system, I showed you from the upper respiratory system down, you've got the back of the nose, the back of the mouth, naso and oropharynx. The epiglottis covers your vocal cords to prevent you from choking on things. You go down the larynx through the trachea and into the bronchi, splitting into your left and right lungs. And you'll notice that the heart is right in the middle. So when you zoom way down into the lung tissue, you end up with these little air sacs, and the air sacs are called alveoli. So in those little air sacs is where all of that gas exchange happens. So you have a capillary bed. You can see the blue little capillaries and then the red capillaries going around these alveoli, or these air sacs. That's where all that exchange happens. So if you zoom way in, what you see is here's your air sac. The blood coming from the body without oxygen in it comes into the lungs, gives off its CO2, receives oxygen, and goes back out to the body as oxygenated blood. And so that's the purpose, the biggest purpose of our lungs is to continually be oxygenating our blood so that we can then take that oxygen to the tissues. You know, we don't talk a lot about respiratory health, but as soon as we're not oxygenating well, we know it, right? So if you look deeper here, you can see that exchange. Imagine if this air sac here was filled up with fluid. and how difficult it would be to exchange gas, because you can't exchange CO2 into fluid. You have to exchange it into air. These are all gases. So if your lungs and your air sacs are filled with fluid, you can't make that exchange, so you're going to have some issues with oxygenation. So a little bit more about the anatomy and kind of how it affects the function of the lungs. So we have our pleural cavity is what we call it. You'll notice there's two membranes. There's one right around the edge of the lungs, and then there's one around the outside of this cavity. And those are called pleura, or just pleural membranes. Visceral and parietal, you don't need to know that, but just know that you have membranes. There's fluid. This light blue is fluid in between these two membranes, and it's very, very sticky. And so essentially, those membranes are stuck together by the presence of that fluid. And so what happens is they adhere to each other, they adhere to the muscles around the ribs. So as the ribs and muscles expand, the lungs will also expand. And so it kind of, because those membranes are stuck, it almost pulls the lungs open, and the diaphragm will go down, and it creates this negative pressure. It pulls air into the lungs. So that's you breathing in. And then when you want to breathe out, you're going to contract all of those muscles and push the lungs and force that air back out into the system. It seems like a very, very active process. You're like, oh, let me expand these muscles and let me contract them, and then you force your air out. But it's actually a automatic process that your body knows how to do. Now, there's a big word called surfactants, and you may or may not have heard of this before, but surfactants come into play a lot with premature babies. But essentially, surfactants is what makes these membranes stick together. It's a chemical that actually makes this sticky, and it makes it all stick together. Premature babies have not produced enough surfactant yet, especially at less than 24 weeks. And so they have a lot of breathing problems because those lungs aren't sticking to the outside wall. And therefore, even when they try to take a breath and they expand those muscles, the lungs aren't going with them because it's not sticky enough. And so that's why a lot of premature babies tend to have respiratory problems. So having a really good surfactant system helps so that the effort that you make actually works, and your lungs will actually expand when you expand your rib cage. So a little bit about respiratory health and kind of the conditions that we see. You have upper respiratory infections. So you can see here, we talked about, the nose and the oropharynx in the back of the mouth, but you also have all of these sinuses in the front of your face, on your frontal bone or your forehead, on your cheeks. And you guys look at this picture and tell me that you haven't had sinus pressure in one or more of those places, right? So you have these sinuses that are right near your upper respiratory system. So what happens is, as your nose has these little hairs in it, and we all know that, and it traps this bacteria, it gets trapped in that little filter, which is the hairs, and it starts this inflammatory process, which is essentially an immune response. Inflammation and an immune response is normal when you have a threat. And so when we start that immune response, what we start to see is swelling or inflammation and mucus buildup. And as those things build up in your upper airway passages, they back up into your sinuses. And so then you end up with a sinus infection. So all of that ends up where you feel like somebody's just got your face in a vice grip, right? Because everything's under so much pressure. And so what happens then is all that bacteria kind of drips. You've heard of postnasal drip. So all the mucus and the bacteria with it ends up typically dripping into the lower respiratory system, which is where you kind of will start to end up with like a bronchitis or a pneumonia. So that's upper. In terms of lower respiratory, we do have things that are more chronic, like asthma. In asthma, there's two different processes that are happening when somebody has an asthma attack. The first is that there's swelling and inflammation within the air passages. And the second is that there's actually constriction of the air passages. So you have two major problems going on at the same time with asthma. So if you look at this picture a little bit closer, this is a normal airway where you have your smooth muscle of the trachea is relaxed. The inner lining, which is a mucous membrane, is normal and there's no issues. In an asthmatic airway, you tend to have a thicker wall, more inflamed wall. So you have a thicker mucous membrane, a thicker wall, and some of that swelling and inflammation. And then during an asthma attack, all of these smooth muscles will start to contract. So not only do they have the thick wall, but then they have the narrow airway. And this is where you start to hear wheezing, and you have really, really significant issues getting air in and out. So that's asthma. You also have things like bronchitis. Remember, we looked at the anatomy of the lungs, where the trachea comes down and it splits into bronchi. So all this means is it's inflammation of the airway passages. And it's usually due to infection, most commonly bacterial, but it can be caused by viral infection as well. And then you have pneumonia. So some people get these two confused. Pneumonia is actually a fluid buildup in your lungs. You can have bronchitis and pneumonia at the same time. Now remember, I said that a normal immune response brings on some inflammation and an inflammatory response where you get fluid buildup in those mucous membranes and you get swelling. And so it's the same thing in pneumonia. You've had some sort of insult or infection, and you end up with that inflammatory response that builds up fluid in your lungs. Excuse me. And so that is kind of the difference that we have between pneumonia and bronchitis. Bronchitis has to do with the airways, whereas pneumonia has to do with fluid in the lungs themselves. In terms of the cold and flu viruses, you kind of end up with a combination of things. You'll have an upper respiratory infection usually, combination of the infection, swelling, inflammation in the airways, all caused by a virus. So it's a little bit of a combination of everything with that upper respiratory component as well. But remember, it's caused by a virus as opposed to bacteria. So what are our goals when we have any kind of respiratory condition? Our goals will be dependent on what's going on, but generally we'll have some similar goals. So one is we want to increase or improve the surfactant effect. So we want to, if surfactant is an issue, like I said, in premature babies, we want to make sure that those lungs are responding to the expansion of the ribs and they're sticking like they're supposed to. We want to decrease any mucus production or break up any existing mucus because that can help clog up the airways. We want to decrease any swelling or inflammation, open up the airways, and help to expel that mucus or do an expectorant. So that's something that helps you cough all that stuff out. Or you might want an antispasmodic or a cough suppressant because you're coughing so much that it hurts, or maybe you're having those spasms of the airway passages like in asthma, and so you want to prevent those spasms so that you can relax the muscles. So let's talk about oils for respiratory support. I'm literally going to tell you the quality or the benefit of the oil, and then I'm going to list a bunch of them, and at the end we will talk about how to choose and how to use them. So antibacterial oils. Lemon actually has good antibacterial properties. Eucalyptus, oregano, lavender, tea tree or melaleuca, nioli, which is a different version of melaleuca, ravensara, peppermint, cinnamon, clove, rosemary, or you could have some sort of protective blend that has oils like wild orange, clove, cinnamon, rosemary, and eucalyptus all blended together. The beauty of and the purpose of using essential oils for antibacterial support is that you can fight these bacterial and viral threats without building up any kind of resistance. One of the #1 reasons why people get sick these days is because of antibiotic resistant bacteria. These bacteria are learning and they are smart and they are outsmarting us. And so being able to address those threats without building up resistance is really, really important. So antispasmodics. So this would be something that would help with those airway spasms or any chest tightness, or to help decrease coughing. So chamomile, German chamomile is a great one. Lemon, again, bergamot, basil, rosemary, clary sage. Clary sage is great for this. Peppermint, petitgrain, bergamot, eucalyptus, or again, you could choose some sort of respiratory blend. to have something like laurel, peppermint, eucalyptus, melaleuca, lemon, cardamom, ravensara, and ravensara together. So a blend like that together would help to address everything kind of all at once, especially to help really open up airways. It releases that smooth muscle of the airway passages so that everything can kind of open up. Oils that are expectorants, so that means that they help you to remove the mucus from your passages, would be something like fir, frankincense, lemon, eucalyptus. Notice eucalyptus has appeared quite a few times already. Nioli, ravensara, pine, or again, that respiratory blend. Any kind of respiratory blend that includes some of these oils blended together would be great for helping to get rid of the mucus, as well as, like I said, opening up the airways. So anti-inflammatory oils, there's that chamomile again, marjoram, frankincense. Frankincense is a very powerful anti-inflammatory. Rosemary, eucalyptus, clary sage, juniper berry, vetiver, sandalwood, ginger, thyme, peppermint, lavender, and there are many, 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 many more, but I picked some of the highlights. Anti-inflammatories, when we talk about how to use them, are really great because sometimes you think you just need to take it internally, or you think you just need to put it on the bottom of your feet, but actually you literally can put this like on the outside of your sinuses, on the outside of your chest, and really address what's going on pretty directly. So a couple other things, oils that are great for opening your airways: peppermint, eucalyptus, myrrh, and then again a respiratory blend like this one. Oils that are good surfactant protectants and mucolytics, and a mucolytic is something that will actually break up the mucus that is already there. Lemon is one of the best for that. There's actually been scientific studies showing the benefits of lemon on surface tension with surfactant. And myrrh is also really, really good for that. And then a digestive blend. So a digestive blend would be something like ginger, fennel, coriander, peppermint, tarragon, anise, and caraway. But remember that all of the inside lining of your lungs is mucous membranes, just like the inside lining of your digestive system. So to help break up that mucus, decrease mucus production and things like that, you could actually use a digestive blend aromatically or topically on your chest to help improve some of that mucus issues. I thought that was really cool that you can kind of be smart about what you're doing because you know you're talking about mucous membranes. And then here's your allergy trio. So this time of year, seasons are changing. I know somebody who said they diagnosed me with seasonal allergies, but I literally have them every day. And I said, it must be one for every season. So lemon, lavender, and peppermint. If you go back through and you look, all three of these appear in one or more of those places. So lavender has really great anti-inflammatory as well as antihistamine properties. Lemon will help break up that mucus and prevent more mucus formation. And then peppermint's great for opening up the airways, for helping you to get the mucus out. So it's a really amazing trio to help relieve any kind of allergy or seasonal threats that you've got going on. So I love these together. These are also fantastic to use internally in a gel cap or a soft gel or a veggie cap, whatever. You can use a couple of drops of each internally on a regular basis to help kind of stave off some of those threats. So how do we use these oils to benefit our respiratory system? Well, the number one way, well, the top two ways, one is to diffuse. The benefit of diffusing is that you can clean the air and get any kind of threats out of the air. You can also affect like your whole household, right? So your kids or your husband or your wife or whoever's in the room with you can actually be receive the benefits as well because you're diffusing the oils into the whole room. And so I love using a diffuser for this. The second way is just to inhale directly from palms. So 1 drop of a respiratory blend, 1 drop of peppermint, or maybe a drop of peppermint and a drop of lemon together. Or you can go back and look and say, well, I've got a pneumonia issue, which means I've got a fluid buildup, which is lots and lots of mucus. So let me focus on like a myrrh and a lemon. Or maybe you go, man, I just have a lot of like tightening of my airways, so I need to focus on something that's more of an antispasmodic. So you can actually use that list to decide which oils are going to be the most beneficial based on what your symptoms are, based on what condition you've got going on. But you just put 1 drop or 2 drops, however many, into your palms, rub your palms together, cup them over your nose and mouth, and take a few deep breaths. And I always tell people, take a few deep breaths or 5, and do that until you feel better. And you can do that as often as you need to. You also have an option for something called steam inhalation. And what we do is we'll get a cup or a bowl of steaming water, and we will put a few drops of whatever the oils are that we choose, and then we'll put our face over the bowl and inhale. And depending on the oils that you're using, it's extremely effective. One of my favorite combinations is the Palm Balm, which is peppermint, and remember that helps open the airways, oregano, which has its antibacterial properties, lemon, which helps break up the mucus, and melaleuca, which also has antispasmodic and antibacterial properties. So between the 4 of those oils, you're going to get an incredible benefit by using them together. When you put your face over that bowl and you start inhaling that Palm Balm, you will start dripping mucus out of every part of your airway. And it is amazing. It works so quickly. You can feel it super deep in your lungs as you breathe that in. And it's really, really amazing to start having that benefit. You can also use a vaporizer or a nebulizer. I know that people with like asthma or things like that might actually use a nebulizer on a regular basis. I'll tell you in a little bit, there is a caveat to this. You want to be very careful and make sure that you're using a cold air nebulizer or a cold air vaporizer. And you want to be sure to clean out whatever you're using very, very regularly, if not immediately after use. You can also use these in a warm bath. So even just adding something like lavender and eucalyptus to some bath salts and putting them in a bath, not only is it really relaxing, but you can get those respiratory benefits off the steam and just from kind of the aromatic compounds of being in the bath with those oils. And the last one is my favorite picture. It's topical. So when we talk about topical, you can actually apply something like a respiratory blend right to your chest, right over your lungs in order to benefit them that way. You can also apply something like an anti-inflammatory like frankincense right over your sinuses, on your forehead, on your nose, on your cheeks to address the inflammation. I've actually applied frankincense on my throat as well as my chest before for that reason. And so the topical application is really beneficial. The other place you can put any of these oils is on the bottom of your feet. And the benefit of that is that it gets systemic and it'll affect any bacteria that are anywhere in your system, and it'll really create a whole body effect instead of just aromatic or just in one place. So never underestimate the power of topical use, even though we're talking about respiratory. Typically, like I said, we're going to look at an aromatic use, like all of the other ones is aromatic, but topical is still amazing. And like I said, with the allergy trio or any of these, taking them internally also gets you a really powerful systemic effect. Couple of cautions, like I said, you want it to be steaming, not boiling. And you want it to be cold air or water, not hot, especially. So you wouldn't want to put the oils into a humidifier. Humidifiers heat up the oil or the water, and you don't want to do it that way. You want to make sure that everything stays cold or cold air or cold water, because heating up the oils can actually change their chemistry and you will lose your therapeutic benefits. So you shouldn't be putting these in like oil warmers or anything like that. If you're wanting the benefits, you'll still get the great smell, but you're not going to get the health benefits out of it. The other thing is to remember that citrus oils can break down plastics over time, as well as hot oils like oregano and thyme and cinnamon and clove. They can break down those plastics. So if you are going to use them in something like a nebulizer or a vaporizer, you use a couple let it run, and then clean it out. It needs to be cleaned out right after you're done using it. And I do typically tend to advise against putting citrus oils into a nebulizer where you're actually going to breathe that thing in directly, because you don't know how quickly or how much of those plastic particles have already been broken down, and now those plastic particles are nebulized into the air that you're breathing. So I do typically caution against citrus oils with the nebulizer. In terms of diffusers, you don't usually have that problem because of the plastic the diffusers are made from, but I always clean out my diffuser regularly, especially if I'm using citrus oils for that reason. What questions do you guys have for me? Feel free to, or I'll unmute you guys because I know you're on your phones. What questions do you guys have?
So
then,
oh, go ahead.
it's okay.
You said something about a vaporizer. What do you mean by that?
Some people have, it's almost like a humidifier, except it's colder, basically. And it's small. Essentially, it's the medical version of a diffuser, essentially. And it'll sit in a corner or on their desk, and it puts humidity into the air, but with cold air instead of warm. Cold water instead of warm. So a diffuser typically does the same thing.
Okay.
So then with the hot oils and the citrus oils, are those safe to use in a diffuser, just not in a humidifier or nebulizer?
Yeah, the reason I don't recommend them in a nebulizer is because you're literally putting your face right there with the plastic and the oils. So you really just can't be sure what's happening. They are safe to use in a diffuser. I just clean mine out regularly, but they are safe to use in a diffuser. I also know that diffusers are designed to work with essential oils. The plastics are a little bit sturdier, whereas nebulizers and like those face masks are very flimsy plastic. And I just personally don't trust those, as opposed to not trusting the oil. So a diffuser is definitely a safer way to use those oils. Just make sure that you're cleaning everything out.
Okay.
Any other questions, you guys?
I guess I really don't. I never thought about using something like Breathe, or I mean, anyways, in like the bathtub.
Yeah.
But that would really help somebody. Like, would you suggest doing that the time of day that they have the hardest time breathing, like in the morning before they go outside, or in the evening after they've been outside, or what?
So in terms of putting a respiratory blend into the bath, if the time at which you typically struggle with your respiratory health and breathing the most is the same time you would take a bath, go for it. Otherwise, you can use some of the other methods if there are different times, but I don't think that there's, the thing with essential oils is you want to be really consistent and frequent with your use. So you're talking about 1 or 2 drops frequently every 30 minutes, every hour, every 2 hours, as opposed to 4 or 5 drops once a day. So it's not that you need to do it every morning and you need to do it at night, or at the one time when it's the worst. You can do it pretty consistently throughout the day. But definitely if bath time coincides with trouble breathing, there is no reason to avoid using a respiratory blend. Now, the one thing I will say from personal experience is that peppermint is a very cooling oil. And I put peppermint in a bath once, and I could not, my body couldn't handle it, because under the water, I was warm, but on top of the water where the oil was on my skin, I was like freezing and shivering because it's such a cooling oil. So if the respiratory blend that you have does include peppermint, I do recommend maybe using some of the individual oils instead of a whole blend because of the peppermint. That's my personal experience. It might be different for you, but it was not a relaxing experience for me to use the peppermint in the bath. So that's just my 2 cents on the peppermint bath.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. All right, well, awesome. Thank you guys so much. I will send you this presentation tonight so that you have this so you can refer back to it, okay?
I didn't get the one from last week. Can I get that one?
Uh-huh.
Sorry.
Mommy,
Thank
I
you.
want to start working on my actual habitat.